When Key and I started dating, she made sure I attended all of her family events. At that time, her grandparents were still alive and they ruled the house. Kiki's father had 2 older brothers and 1 younger sister. Kiki's mother was the only child in the family, and so her mother's parents doted on Kiki and her brother. These gatherings were always crowded with aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, and their distant relatives. Since Kiki seemed to have a crush on me, I familiarized myself with her entire family tree, mostly friendly, but some had doubts. "What do you do for a living?" "Ryan?" Kiki's Uncle John asked, as about a dozen adults gathered around one of the food counters. "I'm an assistant dispatcher. I help schedule the trucks." It didn't impress any of them, but I acted confident enough to say it was a good job for me. I genuinely believed it was I couldn't afford a college degree and no one was willing to pay for it. For me, this job had a future. Even though I didn't have a degree, I was probably the only one who didn't have that precious degree. So Kiki got caught up while I was deliberately distracted. Apparently, Kiki didn't pay attention to their concerns and I passed the smell test. Later that year, Kiki and I were married. When the transportation company I worked for went bankrupt shortly after we were married, we were forced to pay for our health insurance. Being relatively healthy, we decided to only go to medical specialists. Kiki's dad's brother, Uncle Ted, was the family doctor. He agreed to give up most of his fees for us and Kiki and I became his patients. According to Ted, we lived in a big city. His practice was in a town of about 6,000 people, 50 kilometers away from us. The population of our town was rapidly approaching 50,000. Ted's office belonged to him alone. He did not believe in joining forces. I don't know the exact number, but he had at least a few people working for him in the first 2 years of our marriage. I think I saw Ted once when I got a strep infection. I got a shot of penicillin in my buttock. There were a few more visits for checkups and blood work, but nothing serious. Kiki went out with Tad several times before she got pregnant. Tad refused to deliver the baby, citing that malpractice insurance was astronomically expensive. Instead, he recommended a specialist in our town. We had previously agreed to hold off on starting a family, but Kiki's birth control pills somehow didn't work. Uncle Ted dismissed them as unreliable. That's how Nathan, my oldest son, came along just after our 3rd anniversary 2 years later. I held Ginger in my arms. I think this woman doctor did a very good job. Let's face it, if Kiki liked her, so did I. Hardly any man has any idea what it's like to be pregnant and give birth, screaming. The 100-kilometer round trip to visit Ted and his sick children didn't last long. We started seeing medical professionals closer to home for emergencies. Life was good. I was moving up the career ladder and now managed 5 employees. Kiki went back to part-time when Ginger went to preschool. My job as manager included health benefits, which really helped reduce personal expenses. Even though we stopped using Ted, we were still sad when he died of a heart attack at the meeting. After the funeral, Ted's widow handed me several envelopes. These are copies of your medical records from Ted's practice. We wanted to make sure each of his patients got their records. Don't worry, I didn't peek. The envelopes were sealed pretty securely. I hadn't visited Ted in a few years, at least for me. But I had taken my kids with me a few times. I just didn't get sick. Kiki's envelope was much thicker because she still went to him for annual medical checkups and such. Ginger and Nathan's envelopes were thin because they only visited him a few times so as not to lose them. I went and put them in the trunk of our car. A few days later, I opened my trunk to put a few boxes of work-related stuff in there. After loading the boxes, I carried the envelopes back into the house, putting mine in my briefcase. I carried the other 3 envelopes into the kitchen. Look, Kiki, Ted's office wanted to make sure we all had copies of our medical records. I said, holding out the envelopes containing Kiki's and the kids' charts, tour. Kiki's reaction, of course, was not what I expected. I really couldn't understand what was wrong. Alarmed, it didn't make sense. I repeated what I had been told, don't worry. I wasn't peeking another strange reaction. When Kiki's eyes were fixed on the envelopes, as if I had handed her a grenade with the pin removed, she counted the 3 envelopes several times. After gathering her courage, she counted to 3 again. You got yours too. Yes, I did dinner, smells good. What are we cooking? Yes, roast potatoes and salad. Everything will be ready in about 30 minutes. I have a home office. Since some of the information on my computer is confidential, I always lock my office. This also meant that I was responsible for keeping order. Such is life. I spent the next 20 minutes answering emails. When I sat down to dinner, Kiki's eyes were red. Ginger and Nathan had to be pulled away from the TV. "Why were you crying?" She ran her palm over her face. "It's just sad that Ted died so suddenly, and so young. I was struck again by how differently Kiki was acting. She practically didn't shed a tear at his funeral. I guess death affects people differently. I'm not one for nearness, especially in my office. However, I do know where things are. After about a week, I began to suspect that someone had been in my office because things were not exactly as I had left them. Nathan or Ginger would have made a mess, so maybe Kiki cleaned up after them." Kiki denied knowing anything about it. "Perhaps I didn't know my home office as well as I thought I did." Kiki perked up after a week, and in my opinion, the sex with her intensified. For the next 6 months, things went smoothly as the kids got older. We made friends with the parents of the kids who participated in the various activities. Our kids were involved in dance, gymnastics, softball, baseball, basketball, and I'm sure I haven't mentioned many of them. I have been a head coach or assistant coach at many sporting events. Kiki became close to about a half dozen women, and we started having bi-monthly meetings if classes allowed. This was at Ben and Jill's house. I really wanted to back out as I was having severe headaches, and on top of that I had skin cancer removed from my neck. Sitting in the recliner chair was much nicer than the party. Kiki promised me something special if we went. So we went. Yeah, well, little head still decides some things. Our relationship had been strained for years when word spread that I wasn't feeling well. One of my parents, Rick, offered me some cannabis-infused marmalade. "It'll cheer you up a little. It's got some dope in it." Rick is the kind of guy who is about 50 pounds overweight, wears the same earring in his ear as his favorite action hero, and is about to lose his house to foreclosure. And yet he's a self-proclaimed expert on just about everything. So he explained that edible cannabis first enters the stomach, then the liver, and then the blood and brain. The liver converts the drug into a stronger form, and this, combined with the substance from the original product, enhances the high. Since this is legal in our state, I used one of these. Everything happens for the first time sometime since I was an inexperienced user. The effects were strong and fast. I found a bedroom and stared up at the ceiling, which was transforming into something only imagination can create. Any pain I might have had was long gone. Was the music actually playing, or was it in my head? My watch indicated I had been here for over an hour as I crawled off the bed and crawled to the bathroom after emptying my bladder. I crawled back to the bed, but this time I curled up on the carpet. Eventually I made it out of the bedroom. The banister on the stairs was like wild grass swaying in the wind. It was too hard to try since I'm pretty sure they're not supposed to spin like that. So I sat down on the top step. From there came the treacherous sounds of female chatter. Every now and then there was the sound of laughter as some of the ladies do. When I focused again, I realized they were talking about sex ecstasies, preliminary caress when they like to be kissed. I guess I never really appreciated what the women were talking about. An unfamiliar voice ranted about how much she liked being licked. Others joined her. It was then that I heard Kiki's voice. "It's been so long since I've done that. Ryan did it all the time, but I bet it's been 8 years. Well, I've been crucified for being an inattentive lover and a poor semblance of a husband. Get some rope and find a tree. Build a gallows, sharpen the guillotine. Death to the selfish husband." How could I? What a bore. Under normal circumstances, I probably would have let it pass, but I was high and not thinking straight. I was definitely out of my mind. The ladies heard me coming down the stairs and like crickets fell silent. My wife asked, feeling better. Yes and no, I had to defend my honor 10 years past. Kiki looked confused. Yeah, why has it been 10 years? Am I being unfair to you? Don't make me out to be the bad guy. Explain to them why Kiki's eyes opened too wide. She looked like one of those kids in Margaret Keenan's painting Ryan, Please Not Here. Come on, Kiki, you shared with me, let me share and care too. You see, Lady Kiki gave me an STD. It happened before we had kids, but I didn't find out until 10 years ago, which was 7 years after that. Yes, there is no way I would have agreed to a divorce after I found out. No, I didn't know who was there on any given day. Hell, for all I know, she's entertaining your husbands on the side. Every time I see her flirting with a guy. I wonder if she's sleeping with them when you're constantly being lied to your mind. Creates all kinds of scenarios. No, it's not. As Kiki covered her face with her hands, she was crying. As I spoke, the frightened looks on the women's faces told me that they were still planning my quick and painful execution. Jill, the waitress, told me off. Ryan, I think that's enough. Come on, Jill. I'm not lying. 17 years ago she cheated on me. 17 years ago she started lying. 17 years ago she decided to fool me. 17 years. She was forced to tell me untruths. It never happened. 17 years while we stayed together, despite the fact that in a divorce, it's all against the fathers. To be sure, I had my children's DNA tested. They're mine. All the ladies looked at me sideways, but I held back my smirk. God, I was so glad to finally get this off my chest. For 10 years, I'd put up with it and looked out for signs of infidelity. I can't say I ever thought Kiki was still cheating, but then again I missed all the signs 17 years ago, so my track record sucks. Thank you for letting me speak my mind. I'll let you ladies get back to talking about ecstasies and husband sex as I walked to the sound of music in the backyard where no music was playing. Damn, I'm still high. 10 years ago, Ted's envelope with my medical records sat in my briefcase for a few days before I sent it to my mailbox. It ended up at the very top of the mailbox because I always felt like I had more urgent things to do. Besides, there were no surprises in there. Right. It was 6 months before I decided to open it. I sat in my office on hold and listened to a recorded message telling me how much they appreciated my business. Just about every minute I was reminded how important I was to them. This gave me time to put my desk in order and clean out my mailbox. When I got to Ted's envelope, I carelessly opened it. There were 2 or 3 office visits on each page, pretty boring stuff, and sometimes it's hard to make out his handwriting. But then there was this. Prescribed to take deoxycycline 2 capsules for breakfast and 2 for dinner daily for a week. For chlamydia. I was confused. I thought chlamydia was a sexually transmitted disease. I had never had a sexually transmitted disease and had not done anything that would cause me to be concerned about contracting it. So I did a search on the internet. It is a sexually transmitted disease. The problem is that I was never told I had chlamydia, judging by the date. It was a month after our 2nd anniversary before the kids came along. After studying Tad's records, I realized I hadn't been to his appointment. During all of my office visits, my weight and blood pressure were measured. Then some memories began to surface. I remembered getting a call from his office. They said Kiki had an infection and had prescribed me something as a precaution, just in case I was too busy working to think about it. A week later, the pills were out, and I still didn't feel sick. My simmering rage was interrupted by the fact that my delayed call was actually answered. Despite some absent-mindedness, I had solved my work problem. The next step was to ask the receptionist not to take my calls. Back to searching the internet. I learned all about the symptoms and timing of the progression of the disease. Kiki caught the disease on our 2nd anniversary cruise, give or take a week. It was a small cruise, just cruising around the Gulf of Mexico, but we drank quite a bit. Kiki did a lot of dancing and we had great sex the whole time. Other memories reminded me that the great sex resumed around the same time. I took this medication, a month of very good sex that resulted in Kiki getting pregnant with Nathan. It wasn't the right time frame for us to start a family, but I didn't question why the birth control pills didn't work. Kiki thought it was because of the medication she was taking. The internet confirmed that doxycycline can affect the effects of birth control pills. That's just great. My family freaked out because Kiki couldn't keep her legs closed. Shit, was Nathan even mine? Shit. What about Ginger? I had no idea what I was supposed to do. It was tearing me up inside. Ted and Kiki had conspired to hide Kiki's STD from me, who had infected her. I almost threw up. Was she raped? Is she still seeing someone? Had the pleasant memories of illicit sex left her? And was she keeping her mouth shut? Muting the sound on my cell phone? I didn't notice that I'd missed the call from Kiki. Glancing at the wall clock, I saw that it was almost 8:30. I usually get home by 6. An hour ago her text came through. "Where are you?" I replied. "Sorry, I lost track of time. I'll be home soon." For the 2 weeks it took to get the results of my secret DNA test, everything went wrong. Luckily, I'm Nathan and Ginger's biological father. During those 2 weeks, I researched the strange divorce laws that apply to men. No fault, really. It's her fault. She's screwing around and I'm getting screwed too. Knowing Kiki's history of lying and hiding facts, I wasn't going to waste my time demanding truthful answers. I became withdrawn and sullen. Even if I didn't apply, Kiki could apply at any time, and I would still become Nathan and Ginger's part-time father. My depression continued to mount, sucking the life out of me. My boss sent me to HR for a referral to a counselor. Had I opened up to the counselor? Not really. I just told him that my wife had cheated on me, and I didn't want to lose my children. His response: drugs. They helped to some extent, but clearly not enough. Call me a nerd, but it was much cheaper to support her. My depression lasted for months. My only escape was playing with my kids, which was the only reason I stayed in the marriage. Kiki didn't put any pressure on me, but there were changes in our family life. I was no longer trying to do my best. Volunteering over time was a thing of the past. Instead, I became a children's coach, assistant coach, or a big fan to fill my free time. My life was driven by a desire to be a fulfilled father to my children, not some stranger. On the weekends, when playing sports with 2 children became unbearable, I reduced my work week to the minimum necessary to receive health insurance benefits. This allowed me to increase my coaching responsibilities. Kiki didn't like the loss of income. I ignored her complaints. We were making ends meet, but we had trouble saving for a rainy day. Kiki would sometimes ask me if everything was okay, and I would lie to her that everything was okay. She knew something had changed in our relationship, but neither of us wanted to talk about it. Of course, Kiki could have backed out at any time, but she never did, even though it was obvious that we were no longer the loving couple we used to be. Today the barbecue seemed less festive today. The ladies had returned, but Jill and Kiki were still gone. When the crowd dwindled to a few people, I went in search of them. Apparently Jill and Kiki were locked in the master bedroom. I asked Ben to pass on the message that I was heading home. Ben informed me. Jill says that Kiki is staying with us for the night. She also said some unflattering things about you. What's up, buddy? Kiki's past caught up with her tonight. I bit her ass hard. I was high at the time and I probably should have kept my mouth shut. Well, it's all out in the open. Now, great party. Ben, I'm out of here, don't worry. I'm not driving. I really wasn't very high at that point. And surprisingly, I didn't feel guilty about what I'd done. 10 years ago, my soul was torn apart, and I had come to terms with my life and marriage. I think Kiki had experienced some of what I went through. Both kids were home and tucked away on their phones. They mumbled that they were glad I was back. Eventually, everyone went to their rooms. When dawn came, I was alone in my bed. There was no sign that Kiki had come home. There was no trace left of my first drug chewing gum. Jill left a message: "You're a real asshole." Kiki will be home this afternoon. Since I have 2 active kids, I didn't have to worry about them since they had their own hobbies. A day off from sports meant they could spend time with their friends. It was only when Nathan was walking out the door that he finally noticed that Kiki was not there. "Where's Mom?" he asked. "Last night she slept over at Jill's house. We had a little disagreement. She should be back soon." He just shrugged like it was no big deal, probably because I presented it like it was no big deal. The gutters needed cleaning, so I took it up to keep myself busy. I was picking up trash when around 2 p.m. Kiki walked in looking a little frazzled. "You bastard," she shrieked before slamming the front door shut. This was followed by the sound of breaking glass and more yelling, swearing, and insults. I should probably spend the night in a motel, so I hit the road. Later, Nathan wrote, "What the hell happened? Mom is crazy. Where are you? I spent the night at a motel. Why don't you find your sister and join me?" Half an hour later, Nathan and Ginger were on the couch. I briefly told them what had happened and then took Ginger to her private room. Sunday morning, the 3 of us found Kiki unconscious on the kitchen floor. She smelled of alcohol. Nathan had to climb in through the basement window to get into the house because all the door locks were dead bolted. There was glass everywhere from plates, glasses, and anything else that could break. I hit a nerve with her. Nathan and I decided to stay in the motel room again. Ginger had decided to spend the day with my parents, so we dropped her off after getting ice cream beforehand. Around dinner time, Ginger texted, "Mom apologized for trashing the house, haven't heard from her. It doesn't sound like she plans to talk to you. I think she's spending the night at her parents' tonight. I'm staying at the motel again tonight, Nathan's with me. If you happen to stop by the house, text me if she's gone. I'm staying put. See you." Soon Monday, we decided Kiki was gone and moved back in. I hired a cleaning lady to clean up. The kids were savvy enough to put off more serious matters for another time. Kiki didn't show up until the following weekend. She was talking to Ginger. She was talking to Nathan. She glared at me. I locked myself in my office. We didn't have a spare room, so Kiki and I slept in the same bed. But that doesn't even tell you how cold it was in that room. A couple weeks later, when I got home, Kiki was already waiting for me. My biggest worry was that she would be armed. I was wrong. How could you? That was her first lunge. I would have asked you the same thing back. I'm sorry I was young and stupid. Uncle Ted read me the Riot Control Act. I felt like I wanted to die,
Yeah.
but 10 years later, I felt like I wanted to die for the sake of the children I stayed. I hope you get over it and do the same. It was just one time. Kiki, I can't believe it was like that. You lied and schemed to keep me in the dark. Why was it so exciting that you just couldn't let it go for all? I know you might still be doing it. No, that's not true. I've spent the last 17 years trying to be the best wife in the world, except you'd have to be honest with me. Would you still be with me if you hadn't gotten an STD? No, it was a one-time thing. You were snorkeling and the company I was with on the beach was doing drugs. I was high and it all happened so fast. I was so stupid. I showered dozens of times trying to wash away the betrayal. You have to believe me. That was the only time I stood silent. Unable to continue the conversation after another minute, Kiki whispered, "What does this get us?" I'm in a place I never thought I'd be. It's too late to do the right thing now. Were you ever going to tell me after Ted died, no one knew about the STD? But me, after you got your medical records, you were fine. So I thought it was buried. There was no reason to tell you about it. We survived as a married couple and produced 2 wonderful children. The family came about because your whore meds made birth control pills useless. I found that out because of something in my medical records. It took me 6 months to finally look at it. All you're doing is bringing back the pain I had 10 years ago. I'm gonna go for a walk. Ryan, please stay home so we can talk. Oh, now you want to talk? Not now. I might say something I can never take back. Just leave me alone. Just let me walk around the block. I'll be right back. We didn't make much progress in our negotiations. It was several weeks before Kiki and I resumed having the sex we both seemed to need. Thus began our mutually beneficial sexual relationship, though without love, things were never quite the same in the house. I made it clear to Kiki that I would stay until Ginger left for college, and that was all I could promise. We did family things as a family, but I didn't hold hands or snuggle with her in public for the last 10 years. Life went on as it was. Kiki and I were friends on preferential terms. Although we had sex, her years of cheating had killed the romance in me. The kids thought I was being unreasonable to their mother. I just couldn't accept such dishonesty. My relationship with both of them suffered. We kind of stopped going to these barbecues with other people. I guess my comments made me a pariah, and the ladies were wary of Kiki. Sometimes on weekends, Kiki would go out with her girlfriends unless there was some kids' event to attend. A month before Nathan went to college, Kiki decided to announce her intentions. She sent a message to Ginger, "Nathan and me tonight. As soon as everyone is home, we will talk Nathan. Ginger, your father and I are estranged and I will dissolve this marriage when Ginger goes to college in 2 years. Believe me when I say you have nothing to do with our problem. If anything, you've helped us stay together." This long as hard as I tried to get my point across to the kids, I failed. Although no one said a harsh word, our family was falling apart after Kiki's announcement. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. It took 2 years to work out the details and the divorce was finalized quickly. The court approved it, and it was expected to become final shortly after Ginger went to college. Kiki and I visited Nathan at school. We had family get-togethers. One day Kiki and I even went to the coast to Sunday on the Sands Kids. We wondered if there was any chance of our rescue. There wasn't. Epilogue. It was like one of those scenes from a children's movie. Crying parents, seeing their youngest daughter off to her freshman year of college. Ginger pleaded with Kiki. "Please, I've made my decision. It's the way it has to be." "I'm sorry," sounded her mother. After Ginger's platonic hug, I walked back to the car alone. Kiki stayed with Ginger until her tears dried. They talked and cried and then talked some more. I listened to the preseason soccer game on the radio. In the car, Kiki and I didn't stop. On the way home, we hardly spoke at all when I put my keys on the kitchen table. Kiki went upstairs and finished packing. It was sad. I could barely hold back the tears. She pushed me away, not wanting to deal with the problem. Honestly, I chased her and the kids away because I couldn't forgive and forget as much as I missed her. I also needed to start a new chapter in my life. Our time together had started as a flash of flame, and now all that was left of it was a thin trickle of smoke. Why did people who supposedly loved each other do this to each other? Maybe they loved themselves more. We both made the same mistake. She didn't trust me enough to talk about it, and I didn't trust her enough to talk about it. How stupid and stubborn is that we were both afraid of losing something. We held dear and we ended up losing it anyway. It took me a few weeks to move and get the house ready to sell. It was bought by a couple with 2 young children. May things work out better for them than they did for us. Kiki found someone much sooner than I did. This is not surprising since I had zero interest in another serious relationship. I'm glad I get to work things out with my new girlfriends from time to time. I can come back to this at any time, as it is clear to me that there are many people who want to love and be loved. The decision is up to me, and being single is a powerful, persuasive factor. I wish I could say I'm doing great with my kids, but I'm still the bad guy who ruined our family. Would I do things differently if I could go back in time? I'd like to think I would, because I was there for my kids and they were estranged from me.